Welcome to day 231 on Daily Dose of Hope, and we began just yesterday on the subject understanding the will of God for your life. We say there's a permissive and there's a perfect will. There's nothing as beautiful as a man being at the very center of God's will. No believer is meant to be a wanderer. We are all meant to be wandered out. Every believer is supposed to be for signs and wonders. We are all meant to be offshoots of the bright and morning star. So every believer is meant to be a star in his own right. But before we can come to that place of global relevance, before we can come to that place of eternal shine, before we can come to that place of undeniable impact and influence, we must be at the very center of his will. Not his permissive will, but the center of his will. God will not superimpose his plans or his will on anybody. As a believer who understands you were created for his pleasure, the only way to please that same God is to be at the very center of his will. When you are at the center of God's will, you enter a zone of itch-free progress. You enter a zone of sweatless triumph. And that's why we also emphasize the place of Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. So a believer's responsibility is not to struggle to succeed, but to discover the plan and the will of God for his life. Because when you are in that zone, success becomes inevitable. Now hear this. Anyone can decide his ambition. Ambition is arming yourself to go for a mission. But when it comes to the will of God, it is aligning with his vision. Vision is the unfolding of God's plan concerning your life. When a man is in alignment with God's vision, it becomes easy. You are in front and God backs you from behind. It is easier to align, it is wiser rather, to align with God's vision for your life than being ambitious. Your ambition in life can only take you far. But if you want to become an eternal excellency, the joy of many generations, stay on course and align yourself with the will of God. Jesus said, "For this end was I born, and I'm straitened for it to be accomplished." He lived his life to fulfill God's will. He lived his life to remain at the very center of God's will. If we all live to be at the center of God's will, we will succeed. God will be pleased, and we have eternity for our gain. 90% of believers are not even at the center of God's will. It is crucial to understand the importance of being at the center of God's will. Subsequently, we'll be talking about how do we discover the will of God for our life and stay at the very center of it. God bless you.